This is the Nashvillager podcast. It's July 13th, 2026. The quest to develop artificial intelligence turns 70 today. Sort of. On this day in 1956, a small group of scientists gathered at Dartmouth College to discuss ways they could make machines smarter. The proposal that called for the meeting laid out the stated goal as, quote, to proceed on the basis of the conjecture that every aspect of learning or any other feature of intelligence can in principle be so precisely described that a machine can be made to simulate it. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with context and backstory from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. People had talked about artificial intelligence as some kind of future possibility in a theoretical kind of way before the workshop at Dartmouth. But those guys are generally understood to have been the first to really take it seriously as something they could start trying to develop. Over roughly 2 months, 10 scientists took over the top floor of the college's math building. The participants came and went as their schedules allowed, dipping in and out of the brainstorming sessions. They were computer scientists, mathematicians, and cognitive psychologists from some of the most prominent universities and corporate labs of their day. Some were convinced they would figure out the entire puzzle of making a computer that could think on its own before the summer was up. Others boldly predicted that within 20 years, machines would be able to do everything a human could. That 2-decade mark came and went in 1976. But look at things now. It may have taken longer than the original team at Dartmouth expected, but AI is certainly a force to be reckoned with in 2026. Of course, that reckoning is more complicated than most of those scientists seemed to expect 70 years ago. The current value of AI varies wildly depending on who you talk to. It's the productivity revolution or the soulless automaton stealing human jobs. Concerns about what it can do, the resources used by the computers that power it, and the experience of living or working next to those server farms is fueling much of the discussion over where data centers should and shouldn't be allowed in Tennessee. That's a debate that's playing out county by county, city by city, all over the state right now. But as for the state itself, officials put together a Tennessee Artificial Intelligence Advisory Commission last year, and around the start of December, that group released a preliminary action plan. It sums up their mission as making Tennessee, quote, a national leader in the responsible use of AI to make government faster, simpler, and more efficient. The plan is still in the early stages of specifying areas to study, things like how best to build in safety measures or what school kids should learn about the new technology. In the meantime, a press release went out on Friday from a company called Sphere 3D, saying the firm is targeting Tennessee as a prime location for expanding their AI efforts. Sphere 3D started out in cryptocurrency mining. The company, which is changing its name to Dark Horse Technologies, plans to build more facilities around the state and will need to work closely with the Tennessee Valley Authority. So the firm has hired Chuck Lane's communications firm. He's an East Tennessee lobbyist who represents the fossil fuel industry. The company has also started working with White Oak Strategies. That's run by a former head of the Tennessee Republican Party, Michael Sullivan. With those contracts, people with a very deep and savvy understanding of how the sausage gets made in this state are actively working to open the doors to what seems to be a substantial expansion of AI facilities based in our backyard. So now the question is, what will happen when grassroots efforts to have cities and counties regulate AI data centers bumps up against the high-powered machine of Dark Horse and its new representatives? These are still early days in the large-scale AI rollout. And for every government agency and corporate office expanding their use of AI in the daily workflow, and for every person using chatbots as a substitute for Google or their therapist, there has to be a machine somewhere in some data center churning away on the underlying computations. In just a few minutes, a very human-powered story of stylistic synthesis. Bluegrass meets hip-hop with a dose of jazz, all on the banjo. That's coming up after the newscast.
Nashville Public Radio is always here to keep you informed, whether it's the latest news or music you should check out. Every week, What Were Wednesdays shares the latest happenings taking place right here in Nashville by talking to members of our community, putting on events in your neighborhood and beyond. So tune in to What Were Wednesdays every Wednesday, and you can always find events at WNXP.org/events.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. The Memphis Safe Task Force is under scrutiny for 2 deadly officer-involved shootings in 4 days. In the wake of the deadly shootings, Memphis District Attorney Steve Mulroy points to the way officers are trained. In trainings observed by the group Force Science, Mulroy says instructors mocked the concept of de-escalation and referenced the prosecution of the officers accused of killing George Floyd and Eric Garner as witch hunts. Other Tennessee DAs have rejected Mulroy's statement, calling it reckless. Some current and former members of the Tennessee District Attorney's General Conference say Mulroy's comments undermine prosecutors and promote a political ideology. They say whether an officer involved in a shooting is guilty should be determined by the law. Memphis officers accused of killing Tyree Nichols were acquitted for his death, but convicted of witness tampering. They face another trial after alleged bias from the first trial's judge. A Metro agency is going public with its questions about a recent report on Nashville's place with policing and technology. For WPLN News, Emily West breaks down the criticism in the open letter from the Metro Human Relations Commission.
The independent nonprofit Nashville Police and Public Safety Alliance crafted a comparison report of 10 cities, which the commission says isn't an equitable way to analyze. It looked how those places use different forms of technology in tandem with police departments. Per the report, Nashville doesn't have many of the tools used in similarly sized cities. But the commission says this is actually on purpose because Metro Council policies are designed to be diligent with decisions involving what police can purchase. The Human Relations Commission openly criticizes using license plate readers, a piece of technology police want, but Council won't fund. Metro also doesn't have a gunshot detection system. The letter goes on to condemn the report's lack of looking at symptoms of crime, as well as concerns that technology can widen a chasm of disparity among the city's most vulnerable communities. It calls for a more collaborative process to discuss policing and technology. Emily West, WPLN News.
There's still plenty of contention over the airport authority, even after a new state-appointed board was seated at the start of this month. There's been a years-long battle over who appoints the board that runs the airport, city or state. After action by state lawmakers, the power is now in state hands. But city leaders still say they aren't recognizing that board. They've now sued the Federal Aviation Administration in hopes of maintaining control. Here's Nashville Mayor Freddie O'Connell.
We're fighting for the right to control our own airport through litigation. We have sued in federal court, and we've asked the FAA to enforce a 2024 federal law that says you can't change the airport's oversight body without the consent of the existing board.
Metro did have a different lawsuit against the state, but that case had been authorized when the city-appointed board was in power. The state-appointed board voted to withdraw from the lawsuit. Nashville's public health department is urging people who haven't gotten the MMR vaccine to get the shot after confirming a case of measles in East Nashville. Tennessee's measles cases have risen to single digits in the past 2 years. CDC numbers show that of reported measles cases in the U.S., 93% of patients were not fully vaccinated. Nashville Electric Service has a new policy of trimming trees that are within 15 feet of power lines. The goal is to prevent power outages. Local residents questioned if this would cause more harm than good. And now, as WPLN's Camelia Burris reports, a recently trimmed tree fell on an East Nashville home.
Taya Mashburn was working from home when she saw NES workers buzzsaw a tree in half in her neighborhood. She worried the trimming might leave the tree unbalanced, increasing the odds it might fall. So she went out to speak with the workers.
Don't you feel like this could be a liability for the homeowner? I mean, look at this tree down the street. What you've left behind is just completely facing the house. And I would be concerned if I were that homeowner. And he was just kind of like, yeah, I don't know if it's the best way to do it, but this is what we've been told to do.
She even called NES. They said they are trimming trees according to policy, within 15 feet of a power line. But city leaders and residents worried the policy was too aggressive and reduces the city's tree canopy. And in July, a large maple tree fell on Mashburn's neighbor's house. No one was hurt, but she's now trying to figure out how to fix the damage to her property. Camelia Burris, WPLN News.
Singer-songwriter John Rich of the band Big and Rich was sworn in last week, not by the Country Music Hall of Fame, but by President Donald Trump as his inaugural special envoy for American landowners. As farmers face financial pressure to sell their farms, Rich's role is meant to, quote, address challenges posed by government overreach, activist pressure campaigns, and outside interests that threaten private property rights. The issue has been a concern of Governor Bill Lee. He's pushed legislation to help Tennessee farmers keep their land and crops.
You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org.
I'm senior music writer Julie Height. Years back, I heard about this hot young bluegrass banjo player, Tray Wellington. Already, he had technique and awards to show for it. He was a visionary, too, pushing string band music toward jazz experimentation and recognizing both as black musical traditions. Now he's mapping a new frontier, string band hip-hop.
Yeah, my name is Tray Wellington, and I'm a producer, banjo player, and musician and artist. There's nothing I can't do with this instrument. With every album I've done, I've pushed the boundaries of what can be done in that genre. I'm a very goal-based person, and so when I was looking at this album, I was like, what haven't I done? And I haven't been able to show people that I know how to tell a story. I know how to articulate these things into words.
Walk away from me.
3 in the morning, time reveals palm sweats. Don't know what I feel, I guess. My mind stretched like the phone we used to call anymore. It's just text, boo, lines that line a pocket like an Instagram check.
And I was like, oh, there hasn't been a good blend of looking at hip-hop as folk music. I don't think people should be surprised that I do this album because, you know, I did Pursuit of Happiness by Kid Cudi.
I'm on the pursuit of happiness, and I know everything that shines ain't always gonna be gold.
I grew up in rural North Carolina. There was a disdain for hip-hop music from the people around. You know, there was a lot of people that were like, oh, it's not good music, it's not good for you. My mom was listening to classic hip-hop like Snoop Dogg, Tupac, Biggie, people like that. And so I was hearing a bunch of that from a really, really young age. But then at the same time, another huge influence in my life was my grandpa. He was listening to classic country, he was listening to classic rock, bluegrass. So I was hearing these two different musical worlds that both ended up being very influential for me. There was a class at my middle school called the Mountain Music Club, which was a club where you could learn how to play traditional folk music. So I got to start learning how to play acoustic guitar. And then I heard banjo for the first time in there, and I was like, oh, whoa, that's super cool. When I first got into bluegrass and folk music, a lot of other music kind of went to the wayside because I was so entrenched in trying to learn this instrument. And when I got into college, I started getting into jazz music a lot. And so I discovered John Coltrane, I discovered Roy Hargrove. I started seeing the intersections of the music. As I started going to parties in college, I started also getting this love of hip-hop back. One of the first people I got into right heavily was J. Cole. I remember I went through 2014 Forest Hills Drive, that album. I just wrote down all these lines and I was like, okay, how are these different bars being formulated and how is he building the song?
Look, the real is back, the veil is back.
And then I went back and looked at MF Doom's album, Mad Villainy. Then I went to Illmatic from Nas. I started having these little epiphanies of how bars work and similes, metaphors within hip-hop. Then I was studying all these different producers in hip-hop. So I started making these beats, and they were really bad at first. I'm not even going to lie. I remember having a discussion with myself, you know, in my head where I was like, well, wait a second, you know, you're always saying don't let boundaries keep you from doing something. And so don't let a boundary keep you from doing something that you think would actually be cool. I found a way to integrate banjo into these hip hop instrumentals at the time. False Idols originally had a trap hi-hat on it, you know, it was like
that toke that frees you from your mind for just a second, and I awoke to realize reality surrounds me. Demons are dragging me down. I cry out, I see, but no one hears me.
I had this album I thought done a long time ago. It ended up being the demos for the album, but something was missing. I was doing all the hooks and I was doing everything by myself.
Plenty of times I wake up in the fox I sat looking for it, sipping on a drink as I cruise down the road, forget about everything except you.
And I was like, man, I'm missing my community on this, and I'm missing like my friends being on this. At the time, I was listening to John Mylander's Forecast album, and I was like, this is the sound I hear in my head for this stuff. And so I contacted John. If I re-recorded this with other people, would you be willing to produce it? And he was like, yeah, definitely. I didn't know how I was going to sound with the full band, because literally the first time we'd all played together was when we were recording the album. There was no rehearsals before it, but it came out amazing.
Have you seen The Who? Have you seen The General Man? Somebody off in search of themselves, herds of sheep, led by a man, get involved, he lost in a trance.
I wanted to change people's ideas of what banjo could do. So often I think people look at banjo as like, oh, it's supposed to be this driving thing, it's supposed to be twangy. In bluegrass or folk music, you know, the banjo is such a rhythmic role. But in hip hop, I have drums, bass, that is covering the rhythm. So I can be more of like pad for the band, and I can just add textures to it.
I'm wondering, am I alone now? Have I lost the chances like the bed I just thrown down? Slightly off center, like I might till and fall.
I have to know the art form. I've heard people when they don't know hip hop and they just try to mimic it, you know, and it's really corny. And I didn't want it to come off corny at all, and I didn't want it to come off like I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh, I'm the best rapper. I don't really believe I am, but through studying, I know I'm being the most authentically me I can be, and that's the best thing I can do. I have enough faith in all these different musical genres for them all to listen to this album and think this is adding something to our culture that we didn't have before.
My heart on the table, yeah, like the queen of spades. You're going both ways. I sit and ponder, scroll my phone and wonder if you need space. Searching, thinking all the ways I betray. Can't blame me for feeling the moments that we had were in vain. Cause true love isn't trapped in a cage. It's free to roam, maybe one day.
We do this roundup of Nashville news every weekday, so subscribe in your favorite podcasting app to make sure you never miss an episode. And if you like this, you'll probably enjoy the Nashvillager newsletter too. You'll get perspective from more of my colleagues at Nashville Public Radio and links to the stories we're following. Sign up for those daily emails at WPLN.org/NashVillager. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up tomorrow.